Welcome back to Sláinte to Sustainability from ENSO, where we are simplifying sustainability for your business. So through this podcast series, we really want to try and focus on a lot of the key issues and areas around sustainability globally and here in Ireland, and then how they affect the business world and how you as a business can try and prepare for them and benefit from them as well. This week, we had the end of COP29. The last few days, there was a lot in the news, a lot of ups and downs. And Erin, you were keeping a close eye on things. You've got a few thoughts of the outcomes for yourself. What were the key outcomes and what should people know about COP29?
So I'll break down the key outcomes into a couple of different pieces. Just to start out, I'm not going to talk about every single itty bitty piece of text and things that came out of COP, but these, to me and to most of us that are following COP, are kind of the big outcomes. So I'm going to start just very briefly going over what came out for each of these things, and then we'll discuss a little bit more in detail. The thing that most of our eyes were on really closely was this new finance goal. On our previous episode, we talked about the COP in Copenhagen, where they created the first climate finance goal, which was that $100 billion a year from developed countries to developing countries to help with climate mitigation and kind of taking climate action. We still, to this day, don't know if that goal was ever reached. I err on the side of probably not. This COP, one of the big goals was to come out with a new finance goal for these developed countries to be providing to developing countries, and it needed to be higher. It actually is triple that amount, so it's going to be at least 300 billion US dollars a year flowing from developed countries to developing countries by 2035. So there's a little bit of implementation time there. There's a looser call around that for 1.3 trillion US dollars through a wider range of sources that includes private investment. This 1.3 trillion US dollar figure comes from the estimate of the amount that we need every year to deal with disasters, to deal with any changes that we need to put in place to achieve the Paris Agreement, and kind of so on. However, there's not a lot of specifics on where this money is coming from. The only bit that we know is public funding is that 300 billion US dollars. Something that I was looking into and definitely keeping an eye out for is funding for loss and damages and whether that was going to be included in this finance goal. It was not. There was no progress made around loss and damages beyond the decision that it's not included in this 300 billion US dollar finance goal. We've got our finance there. Now moving on to carbon markets, something that could actually connect into that finance, because there's thoughts that the money that's kind of traded and moved around with these carbon offsets could be considered within that 1.3 trillion broader target. We're not sure how that's going to work yet. Some people believe it should, some people don't. So there's still a lot of questions around there. But carbon markets in general, something exciting did happen. After nearly a decade of work, we've reached an agreement for the first time to have a UN-backed mechanism that will help to broaden and link carbon markets across the world. This is designed to help people achieve their nationally determined contributions, so their voluntary carbon targets, through reductions and removals between countries and organizations, and having some kind of UN rules around this. We still need to approve certain methodologies and guidelines, but this is an exciting step forward. There is a bit of debate about how aligned to the Paris Agreement this market actually is and the impact it will have, but it is a huge decade in the making step in the right direction. So that's, to me, one of the more concrete, exciting things that has come out of COP.
The iterating that over the last 10 years, or is that something that just was a lot of work put into it this year?
So it's been iterated for over a decade, for a long time. It's called Article 6. That comes from the Paris Agreement. It's Article 6 in the Paris Agreement, is about carbon markets. As we learn more and we know the back and forth that goes on with these big global negotiations. And then within that, I did briefly mention the nationally determined contributions. Those are due to be updated by countries this February. The new NDCs are due. So we were really expecting some guidance and hopefully increased ambition around these NDCs coming out of this COP. However, all of the discussions were blocked and deferred, and basically we got nothing about these NDCs. So countries don't necessarily have a lot of guidance about how to move forward with these in the next, what is it, 2 months, essentially. So
Hmm.
we'll see how that goes and whether that gets pushed back because we're really, really going to be looking at them at COP30 in Brazil next year. So that's just a quick update there. The last two bits that I want to talk about are mitigation and adaptation. So, mitigation, we're looking at kind of stopping our emissions at the source, changing the way we do things, new innovations to mitigate the impacts of climate change, so to kind of lessen them. And then you've got adaptation, where we're dealing with the impacts that we're already seeing. So, at COP26, so this was 3 years ago, the mitigation work program was established, and we were supposed to make some strides here and add more information and again hopefully be a little more ambitious because the whole point of the mitigation work program is scaling up mitigation ambition and specifically implementation and action. However, the negotiations pretty much ended in a deadlock here as well. There's a bit of text, but the best word I kind of have for it is it's fluffy. It's very, we had to put something down, so we didn't really get a lot here either.
Something that's being iterated for the next few years as well, potentially, and discussed.
Yeah, potentially, and definitely discussed at the Bonn climate change conference that happens every year. Connecting to that Bonn climate change conference, another thing that got pushed out to there is pretty much any conversation on adaptation, which is interesting because Ireland was actually one of the country pair that headed up these conversations to try to push them over the line at the end of COP. It was them and Costa Rica were really pushing a lot on this, and they did get some things over the line. Minister Eamon Ryan seemed to be in 17 different places at once during this process. And yeah, I was kind of proud to be represented by them as a
Great.
company here. I think they did a great job. However, there's still not enough with adaptation. It's something that we're looking at, but they did adopt the Baku adaptation roadmap. We don't know a huge amount of specifics about this, but it includes the global goal for adaptation that we discussed on our previous podcast, and it makes sure that it is on the agenda for future meetings, which sounds like not a big deal, but there's no guarantee that any of these things are going to be on even the agenda. And the fact that we're taking a step to taking adaptation a little bit more seriously is great here. However, so many things were so deadlocked this year at COP that they just simply ran out of time. And this got pushed to Bonn for more specifics. Yeah, no, the Irish delegates they did their darndest here, and
Good.
it's something that Ireland really has always led the way on is adaptation. Like a huge amount of our climate budget goes to adaptation both here and abroad, which is incredible.
You're talking about a lot of big issues being tackled, maybe not a lot of detail with those. So, with that in mind, like, how do you feel about the outcomes? Were they enough? Were they what you were expecting? Is it more than you were expecting?
I'm gonna start on a positive note. We got a deal. We got a final report. Particularly, we got a final report on finance. There was a time there that it was looking like the delegates were just going to decide, you know what? We are not leaving this COP with an agreement, which I actually didn't even know was an option at COP.
Yes,
You can
likewise.
leave and say, you know what? We didn't get anything. Like, we had these conversations, we did our best, we are just in a stalemate and we cannot come up with an agreement. And sometimes no deal is better than a bad deal.
Mhm.
However, it was good to get those finance numbers out there because it is going to take time to operationalize and get the little like nitty-gritty pieces in place for that to hopefully get that financing operationalized sooner rather than later because it's really, really necessary. However, it's not even close to enough. 300 billion was the bare minimum. People like former President Mary Robinson were saying that we needed, like, literally bottom of the barrel, lowest amount, and we just don't know enough about like how that money is getting to people. Is it grants? Is it loans? And if they are loans, are they tied to something else? It's just, it needs to be clearer, and it
Yeah,
really highlighted this north-south divide where these developed countries that truly caused the problem are just not supporting the most vulnerable populations who are feeling the brunt of it in the way that we should. Not necessarily surprising, and this is pretty much what we were expecting.
yeah.
Both sides of the coin were going to be saying. Moving past that, the carbon markets I think is interesting. I'm cautiously optimistic to see how that all goes. That was
Hmm.
something that I know we were kind of hoping was happening, but I wasn't paying the closest attention to because it's a little bit outside of my niche area of expertise. It's something that I'm also learning a bit more about. So it'll be exciting
Yeah.
to kind of follow that process. And then mitigation and adaptation, and we just need more. and we need more guidance on the nationally determined contributions.
And
So many things just got pushed out, and so many things, like, are now just hinging on COP30 in Brazil when that was already going to be a huge COP, like, and it's just gonna be even crazier now.
yeah, and you know, there's a lot of commentary before, during, and now just in the aftermath of COP, and you know, a lot of it really is around. There's so many big issues to tackle. What gets done is the like format. Do you think is it fit for purpose? Is it something that should continue? Will it actually have the results that's needed to make the change that's needed?
I don't think COP is gonna go away, and I don't think it should go away, right? We need this global cooperation to deal with this global problem.
Yeah.
However, there are certain issues with the current COP process, both that myself and fellow climate scientists and fellow people in the sustainability space have been noticing for years, and then issues that were really publicly called out through an open letter written by Mary Robinson and other prominent, like previous UN Secretary Generals, prominent people who have been part of the COP process essentially from the beginning. In terms
Hmm.
of the Mary Robinson letters, I'm gonna call it. I'm a big fan of hers, so I'll put her name at the top.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's only fair.
Check out the Mary Robinson Climate Justice Institute. It's amazing. So it's really all about the internal contradictions of COP and suggesting reforms. And the biggest contradiction and the biggest reform that I am wholeheartedly behind, and it's something that we did mention in the first COP installment, is having a serious insistence that any country who is hosting COP needs to lead by example and demonstrate high levels of ambition before qualifying as a host.
Yeah.
And kind of to give this a little bit of context, Azerbaijan, where it was hosted this year, the chief executive, so the president of COP, was actually caught facilitating fossil fuel deals in exchange for event sponsorship. It sounds terrible. It is. It is not by any stretch of the imagination the first time that this has happened. We really need to call on the summit to return to its core objectives of climate action. It's just really getting diluted with these kind of shady backdoor oil and gas deals going on. So that is one of the top things that came out of that Mary Robinson letter that I am wholeheartedly behind. A couple of other things that I personally always think about and I've been talking to others about, and it's just something that is crazy important, is who is in the room when we are making these COP decisions? Whose voices are being heard? Who has different power? And who is being prioritized in these actions, right? So the most vulnerable voices are not always centered in this conversation. So those small island developing states, the least developed countries, the people that are at the front lines of the climate crisis that they did not cause and are going to be losing their statehood, are going to be losing resources, are going to be losing their cultures and their families and their homes,
Hmm.
are not centered in the way that they need to be.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm very, very passionate about, if you can't tell from the way I'm talking about it. But
Yeah.
these are also the people that have the knowledge that we need to understand the risks we're facing and what adaptation they've already taken, what they've already done. Like, they're facing it right now. Um,
Yeah.
we're kind of foolish to not take their experiences and learn from them and take action now. COP has always been a highly diplomatic, a highly kind of closed door process, but beyond the actual diplomatic meeting rooms, there is such a vibrant community of civil society, governments, public organizations, protesters, academics that are really having positive and productive conversations and making productive partnerships and sharing knowledge and all of these amazing things. I just wish there is a way to kind of bring that energy and that positivity and that drive for actual action
Yeah.
into the delegate rooms. And I'm not saying that all the delegates are going in there without like working towards that action space,
Yeah.
but it's hard to do. It is hard to do, and I'm not trying to take away from how hard that is. I just think we need to do better. And I
Yeah.
think there are ways to do better, and there are people with more expertise than you or I. Go back to Mary Robinson, who have great ideas about how to do it better. But
Great.
kind of to wrap it up, COP isn't going away. It would take time to change it. We all know it's slow with these big governmental organizations, particularly when they're global. But I just think having the right people in the room, having action centered, and not treating COP as the end of the climate year as we kind of treat it right now. It's like, oh, this is what we're all working towards. We do COP. Cool. I would love it to start being thought of as the beginning of the climate year, right? So
Yeah.
like we have this thing at COP, we came up with all these ideas. All right, we've got a year to take action and to do something. And then at the next COP, so like your next New Year's celebration, essentially, you can
Yeah.
talk about what did we achieve? Great work. What are we going to do moving forward? Like, I just think that, yeah, even
And
just that mindset shift could be really positive.
I think that's a great point. And if you're looking at any business or any other, successful organization, that's what to do. And you're looking at planning for the year ahead with specific action points and
Hmm.
metrics that you can measure against, and really analyzing them the following year. So I think that's a really good point, and it really logical. It makes sense.
Easier said than done, right? And
Yeah.
especially with so COP30 coming up is in Brazil.
Hmm.
So they're really leaning on the we need to preserve like Amazon and the biodiversity and the
Yeah.
connection between climate and biodiversity. So I'm excited about that. I think that's really interesting. And Brazil in general has been, depending on their administration, they've been a climate leader kind of across the board, but they do still have some oil and gas things. But we might be getting closer to Mary Robinson's vision of ambitious leaders hosting COP, which could be cool.
In every episode, we were always going to try and bring this back then to the business case, and what does this mean then for businesses, and what can they take away from COP?
Regardless of these COP outcomes, we all need to still be taking action and prioritizing sustainability. It's the right thing to do. Obviously, we're in this global climate crisis. We need to worry about human rights and taking care of each other and employee well being and our emissions and all of these things. But it is still always going to be the business, like the better business decision to
Yeah.
prioritize sustainability, right? So, for example, if we go back to that finance goal, there is going to be a layer of private finance that comes into climate adaptation and climate mitigation, and most of the time, this private finance comes as investment, and it comes as investment into clean tech, into
Hmm.
innovative startups, into businesses that have been established and are trying to now lead the way in sustainability. It's coming into these cool projects that have the dual effect of economic sustainability and combating climate change. So keeping that in mind is huge. And you
Hmm.
might not even be able to get into that kind of on the investor side by collaborating with some of these cool projects that hopefully will be coming up. With COP itself, I always say my hope comes out of not the delegate rooms. My hope comes out of the people that were physically there, the people that are talking about it online, the people that are now having conversations between themselves about sustainability, about climate change, about the fact that this isn't really getting anything done. Let's do it ourselves. Like we have the
Exactly.
knowledge, we're
Yeah.
sharing it. And I really think the SME community is so well poised to be that hope and to be that change. One, there's a huge number of us, a huge percent of the global economy is SMEs. And so
Yeah.
we are a force to be reckoned with. And we also have a little bit more of an ability to be flexible and innovative and to engage meaningfully with our teams from top to bottom and our stakeholders and our customers and all of that. So, as an SME, if you are happy with the COP outcomes and you're feeling energized by that, amazing. Or if you're more on my side where you're feeling like there could have been more and you're a little bit angry, I guess would be a little bit of the word,
Hmm.
use that and your unique position to start taking action. And you know what? COP may be doing one thing, but you're still moving on that path to sustainability, taking your team, your partners, and yourself in that right direction.
I think that's a really good point to finish with. And these big wheels do turn very, very slowly. And I do think a lot of that negative commentary around COP over the last couple of weeks can really highlight that, yes, it's now time for businesses themselves to take matters into their own hands and really make those simple changes. But as many businesses, we can have a big, big impact doing small
Yep.
changes. So
There's no reason you can't go above and beyond the requirements as like most of us do in our customer service or in our
yeah,
product creation or whatever we're doing. Why not in sustainability too? And there are so many business benefits. We've already done episodes on that. I'm sure we'll we'll definitely talk about it again. It's something that we are passionate about sharing with you. But yeah, go out there and do it. You guys are the ones that are going to make the change.
Brilliant point to end on, Erin. Thank you very much. Really good synopsis. And look, we'll obviously keep commentary coming on any updates around any of those key areas that you talked about
Yep.
and just see what the progress is. And obviously, we'll keep track of it all. Brilliant, Erin. Thank you so much for your insights. Really, really interesting.
Thank you so much. Hope everyone learned something. And if you have any questions, reach out to us.